Okay, so it's been a couple weeks since this Coldcard episode first happened. It's still ongoing. People are still having wallets drained, and a lot that can be said has been said. I'm not going to comment on how it happened or on Coldcard, the company in particular. But what I do want to talk about is what are some of the things I would be thinking about when it comes to Bitcoin, self-custody, and inheritance going forward. I have always been traditionally a person who says that if you can drive a car, you can self-custody. If you can raise children, you can self-custody. If you can ride a bike, you can self-custody. I recommended this, the Coldcard. And that was kind of the party line. That's kind of what I thought most people should do. Because quite frankly, I've come into Bitcoin not just for number go up, but I've also come into the freedom aspect of it. I love the fact that I can send Bitcoin to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and I never need to ask a third party's permission. I also love that it's the fastest horse in the race. I'm not going to lie. And so I felt like people had to self-custody their Bitcoin to truly own Bitcoin. Holding in an ETF just didn't make sense to me. My view has moderated since this whole Coldcard episode because what I have realized is a couple things. One is I think I underestimated the radical personal responsibility involved in looking after your own Bitcoin. To me, that was a journey that I wanted to embark upon. It's something that I took the time and effort to actually understand. And I'm a lawyer by training. I am not a software engineer or an engineer. I don't tinker with stuff. I'm actually somebody who has to spend a lot of time on things that are technical in order for me to understand them. And it took me a lot of time to understand these things. In fact, I spent 2 weeks learning about self-custody before I even bought Bitcoin. That was kind of the way I approached it because I saw it just as freedom money and I needed to learn how to hold it. What I've since learned is that even people who I onboarded into holding their own Bitcoin on a Coldcard, on any device, they didn't know what to do when they were in a bind, when they were in a pinch, when they had to move their Bitcoin. So what I noticed amongst the people that I onboarded was that for the vast majority of them, once I onboarded them, they never did a single thing. They never practiced it. And what I've realized is actually it's the kind of thing you need to practice. It's the kind of thing you need to be vested in learning. If you want to be truly self-sovereign, it's not a once-off thing. You got to commit to actually staying on top of things. You got to commit to learning and practicing. And if you don't care, if that's not what's important to you, you're not going to do it. And if you don't do it, you won't know what to do. And so for those types of people, unfortunately, I'm going to say, you don't seem to want to take that radical personal responsibility. And if you don't, that's fine. There's a bunch of solutions out there in the market. There's multi-institutional custody. There's other custodians who will assist you in a multi-sig quorum. They have a key, another party's got a key, and you'll have a key. It's not true self-sovereign Bitcoin ownership as I would have liked, but the reality is that for a lot of people, that's going to be a better bet. So the first thing I say to people is like, do you actually want to take this radical personal responsibility on? Do you actually want to be your own bank? Do you actually understand how important it is for you to stay on top of things and practice? Because if you do, I'm with you and I'm going to help you. But going forward, if that's not you, that's totally cool because I understand it. You've got other things going on in your life. I'm not being harsh here. This is just reality. You want to own real Bitcoin. And so I'm not going to say go buy an ETF. I'm going to say you should just go and work with any of these custodians. And there's a fee attached and that's the trade-off. That's the price you pay for not investing in your education. Genuinely, I can do it and I'm not technical, but I spent the time doing it. You can do it too, but you need to have the will to do it. And so that's the first kind of realization I have. So let's assume somebody does want to become self-sovereign, does say, look, I want to think about how this actually impacts not just me, but how this impacts my inheritance plan going forward. What are some of the setups and what are some of the tools you would use? Now, obviously, I have for the longest of time recommended Coldcard. Pretty open about that, as are pretty much all the other people in Bitcoin because we all thought it was the best and it turned out to be the worst and completely and utterly incapable of doing the one job it had. So I'm not going to recommend anything. I'm going to say, here are the options. I'll share what I've used, what I'm using, what others are using, and you've got to make the decision for yourself. Self-custody and inheritance involves radical personal responsibility, and it starts with doing your due diligence around the tools you use. So in light of that, let me share what I think are two viable setups and how it works within the context of inheritance. So the first takeaway that I think is pretty obvious to anyone is if you had relied solely on a Coldcard for your inheritance plan, if your loved ones were going to inherit Bitcoin sitting on a Coldcard and the seed phrase was generated through the Coldcard entropy and you didn't roll dice, you could have had that swiped. And so the solution to me is pretty obvious. Multi-vendor, multi-sig. And so what that actually means is you have several different hardware devices, not one, within a multi-sig quorum. A 2 of 3 is the most common, and I recommend that for most people. Collaborative custody providers like Nunchuck and Casa and Unchained and Thea are excellent. They have a platform key that they will sign if you lose a key, if your key is compromised, or if you need to actually move your Bitcoin in a hurry, like in this episode. And so if you use a device like a Trezor, a Jade, a Ledger, definitely not a Coldcard, even the seed signer, there are plenty of options available that are not Coldcards that within a multi-sig quorum you can use such that going forward, if one were to fail, if the device fails, if your seed phrase is compromised, if you have to move in a hurry, if there's an entropy problem, whatever the case may be, you can actually do something about it. I think that multi-sig is the gold standard. I think that it is a lot easier than people make it out to be. It's actually quite simple, and it's something that I personally use myself. I won't go into great details about my personal setup. Safe to say that the only way that I can sleep at night is to secure any meaningful amount of money in a multi-sig. And going forward, multi-vendor, multi-sig is the only way for me. If you're somebody who's not entirely thrilled by the idea of multiple devices for different stacks, and you want to keep things relatively simple, I used to say stay away from a passphrase. No longer. If you've got enough skills and knowledge to be able to roll your own dice more than 100 times, generate your own seed phrase, and then you want to import that seed phrase into a hardware device, one of the devices I've just named, and then add a passphrase, something that is 12, 15, 20, 30, even 40 characters long with uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols, and you want to use that method as an alternative to a 2 of 3 multisig, I think that is viable. It's not something that I probably would use myself, but it is certainly viable because what I like about it is its simplicity. You can just look after those 24 or 12 words, and then you can have a very complicated passphrase that would be almost impossible to brute force based on current GPU strength. And you can distribute that passphrase into a number of locations. That passphrase, compromise in and of itself, is not an issue. It's only when combined with your seed phrase. And so if you've distributed your seed phrase in a couple places, as well as your passphrase in a couple places, when you need to, you'll be able to move your Bitcoin in a bind. And so if I'm thinking about inheritance solutions and recoverability and trying to figure out what makes sense, given what we've learned about Coldcard and some of the lessons that I've taken away, those two setups are probably two that I would explore going forward. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to know where your Bitcoin inheritance plan stands, go to mybitcoinworld.com. You can do a free Bitcoin inheritance stress test. It'll tell you exactly where the gaps are in your setup and what to do to fix them. Until next time.